Hi, I'm Janice O'Malley-Galizio. I am the Community and Media Engagement Manager for the Northern California uh, chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. And I am here with Claire Day, the Chief Program Officer for the chapter. And we are going live to discuss the Alzheimer's Association International Conference, which is being held virtually this year. And we're very excited. So welcome, Claire.
Thanks, Janice. I wish we were in Amsterdam together.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Live like we usually are, instead of being separated on a computer screen. But it is really great to be able to report day one of AAIC, the Alzheimer's Association International Conference. So we're really excited to get started.
Well, thank you again for joining us. So being new to the association, I have heard that in the past when it was done in person, about 5,000 to 6,000 people would have usually attended. And now that AAIC is free and virtual this year, do we know how many people are attending?
Yeah, you know, it's remarkable. So I think 6,000 was probably one of the highest, which for an in-person meeting is really phenomenal. Researchers across the world. But this year, since it's gone live, we have over 25,000 people who are registered for AAIC. And I think what's really remarkable this year is the countries that span those attendees are far broader. 151 countries represented, the highest being in the US, Brazil, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia. Over half of the participants are women. And there are over 100 presenters from our chapter territory here in Northern California, Northern Nevada. And that includes a little bit of the mix like the old days of both the plenary sessions, which are the general sessions sort of open to that broad audience, as well as some of those more specific topics that vary by day. They've categorized it by day a little bit to make it easier. And some of those are being presented live on Central Time and others are on demand. And what's really great, if you register for AAIC, those recordings will be available for up to 30 days after the conference ends.
That's fantastic. So what are some ways to learn more about the findings from AAIC through the week, as I hear that there are a lot of really exciting breaking news coming out of the conference?
I think the most important thing for people to know is it's not too late to register. And we mentioned that it was going virtual. It's also free. This is the first time that this kind of a scientific conference has ever been free. So I would strongly recommend people registering for this, even if you can only attend a few of the sessions. And you can do that by visiting alz.org/AAIC. But the greatest tool that I think we have for breaking news when it comes to science research is the Alzheimer's Association's Science Hub app. And you can find that on Google Play or through the Apple Store. That's going to have sort of the latest and greatest information when it comes to science research. We talk all the time about the fact that we'll be the first to sort of shout it from the mountaintops when there's an effective treatment or cure, when there's something really promising. And that Science Hub app is a really great way to find things.
Yeah, I love that app. It's such a great tool to have. And for anyone that's interested in Alzheimer's disease care and research and studies, this app will provide you with the latest and greatest news that comes out from Alzheimer's disease research.
Yeah.
So speaking of the latest and greatest, the news has gone crazy following the information about how the flu and pneumonia vaccine can lower your risk for Alzheimer's disease. Can you talk about those studies?
Sure. And yeah, I mean, I think, as we navigate the COVID-19 pandemic, I think vaccines are top of mind, right? For not just ourselves, but for family, for when we think about public health. I think we've all learned to become public health experts over the last 140 days. And we know that vaccines, the reason it's so, sort of important when we think about COVID-19 and want to think about something like that for something like Alzheimer's is we know that vaccines are the best way to, convenient and safe way to prevent against a disease, right? So that's why there's been research looking at an Alzheimer's specific vaccine. But what this study is telling us is how both the flu and pneumonia vaccine, especially when you've had multiple flu vaccines or multiple pneumonia vaccines over the years, will associate a lower risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. And so there was at least one study that showed that if you had had more than one or multiple years of receiving the flu vaccine, which of course is the best way to prevent the flu according to the CDC, it was associated with a 17% reduction in Alzheimer's incidence. And the more frequent the flu vaccinations were, the higher, the better chance of the reduction of incidence. So important to talk a little bit about what's the difference between association and causation, right? So an association is sort of a statistical relationship between two things, right? Two variables. And a causation means that, exposure to something causes it. It's that sort of causation. So you can have an association without a causation relationship. So that's important to understand that this is an association. And the same thing with the pneumonia vaccine. This was a second study that looked at both the pneumonia and flu vaccination together. Vaccination against the pneumonia between the ages of 65 and 75, ages of 65 and 75, reduced Alzheimer's risk by up to 40%. And that was depending on genes. And one thing I know that we're going to hear a little bit more about later in the week is the more that we're learning about genetic risk factors and how those genes play an impact depending on who you are. And so it's really important to think about those other considerations too. And so researchers are really learning all about this and how they can, they found this sort of protective association between the flu vaccine and the risk of Alzheimer's. It was strongest for those who received their first vaccine at a younger age. So when we start thinking about brain health, right? And we talk about brain health should be from life, from birth to death. And then, so people who received their first documented flu shot at age 60 benefited more than those who received their first flu shot, like maybe say at age 70 or older. So the younger you get that flu shot, I know many young people think, we don't need our flu shots because we're young. If we get the flu, we get the flu. But we're learning more about how these sort of public health approaches might have some impact on reduction of risk of Alzheimer's as well.
Well, this is really fascinating news. And do we know why this would be the case?
It's a good question. And I think it's very early on to know that. I think there's some speculation about whether or not it has anything to do with health access and good health access. People who are getting flu and pneumonia shots are taking a proactive action to improve their health, to stay healthier, and may have access to better health care. But I think that's all speculation at this point. And one of the things that we learned today is that that's what the researchers want to ask next, is the whys, to really sort of dig a little bit deeper to understand why this particular vaccine would have some impact on Alzheimer's.
Great. Well, thank you so much. If you're just tuning in, we are talking with Claire Day, the Chief Program Officer for the Northern California Chapter Alzheimer's Association, and we're talking about AAIC, which is the Alzheimer's Association International Conference, which is taking place virtually this year. So I know the topic on everyone's mind is COVID-19. So can we expect any science being presented at AAIC that's related or tied in with COVID-19?
Yeah, there is going to be some science specific to COVID and Alzheimer's disease. What we know so far is very preliminary, and I think we can't really talk about those studies until they are released. So again, don't download that Science Hub app and you'll get it breaking news. But it's important to understand that what is going to be presented is very preliminary. It's important to people to know that this is a novel virus, right? So anything that comes out of it is going to be very early on, and it's important to know that when we see anything, that we don't want to just sort of rush to conclusions about it.
Great. I've heard that there are many participants or students at the conference this year. Is that correct?
Yeah, what I love so much about AAIC and this particular research conference is it's really for people who have had a longstanding career in Alzheimer's and dementia science, as well as young investigators, students, postdocs. There's really a little bit of something for everyone. And, you know, I think what's really important when we think about students is students are the ones that are really helping us to keep science moving forward. To they are going to come up with some of these answers that are being proposed today by some of our leading scientists across the world. They're going to be the ones that sort of keep going and finding these answers. And so the fact that AAIC supports students, has special tracks for students through one of our professional organizations called iStart, which is a membership organization. And they have actual tracks and programs specifically for students at the conference. It's also important because it's a great opportunity for students to get to present their early work through either some of their poster sessions or even some of the higher level programs that are being offered. And we know that how much we enjoy working with those young investigators. We have a local Alzheimer's scientific researcher conference here, and we have a special award ourselves just for young investigators, because we need those young investigators to keep the science moving forward. And I remember at AAIC last year, which was held in Los Angeles about this time of the year, hearing from one of the researchers that talked about the lack of Alzheimer's research funding really put a dent in people, and not a good dent in people getting into Alzheimer's and dementia science. We almost lost like a decade of researchers because there just wasn't the funding for people to want to invest in creating a career around Alzheimer's and dementia research. And that's really changing. And AAIC is a great way for students to participate.
Great. So how can participants who are new to AAIC, how can they find out more about the students and the work that they're doing? You talked about the poster sessions. Where can we find that?
Yeah, well, once you've registered for the event as well, you'll be able to really preview the themes that are going on for the rest of the week, as well as really look at the specifics of those presentations. They're going to break them down by different sessions. You'll be able to actually do some research and find the presenters who are doing posters. You're going to be able to find the people that are maybe from your area that are looking to have a presentation that's coming up. So I would recommend registering for the event, and then once you're in the virtual environment, there'll be all kinds of access that you have to really finding out who's presenting and what they're presenting about. And it really is quite a remarkable virtual experience. And we got a little preview of that last week. Janice and I did on one of our staff meetings, but it really kind of allows you to get in and visit exhibitors, visit with the poster presenters when they're having those poster sessions scheduled, so that you can actually interact with the scientists at the same time.
And for those joining us, please, feel free. A free virtual conference, and this is, I believe, never happened before correct?
No, yeah, no, it's never been free and it's never been virtual.
That's right. So you can do that by going to alz.org/AAIC. So let's talk about the conference. It has different themes throughout the week. Are you able to preview for us the daily themes for the rest of the week?
Yeah, I think one of the good things that they did this year was really sort of break it down so that people can kind of focus on the days that maybe might have more interest for them. So today was really about basic science and pathogenesis. Tomorrow's going to be a big day because it's about biomarkers. And biomarkers is one of my favorite things to learn about right now, because biomarkers are the biological markers. That's something within you that can show us a disease. So for example, we know if we have high blood or high cholesterol, they can draw your blood and they can tell from your blood and from lab work what your cholesterol levels are. And using that blood is a biomarker, right? And so biomarkers are changing the game when it comes to Alzheimer's research. It's helping us to detect the disease in a person maybe 10 or 20 years prior to a symptom showing. That's going to be important down the road when we start to think about a therapeutic, when we start to think about how people, what kind of preventative measures we should be taking when it comes to Alzheimer's and dementia. And so while biomarkers today are only being used in research, they're not really available for commercial or for every constituent to get. They really are helping us to identify in research not only those sort of those changes that we need to see within a person early, but they're also ensuring that the people that are participating in clinical trials actually do have Alzheimer's disease. And so if you think about 5 or 10 years ago, before even PET scans, when someone was enrolled in a clinical trial, they were enrolled in that trial based on the same sort of subjective tests that patients get today. So they would probably have an MRI or a CAT scan because they want to rule out anything else. And then they take a lot of those memory tests. And so there's always been some discussion about, well, what if there's a therapeutic that's been tested, but maybe not everybody in that clinical trial actually had the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease? Does it really, that can affect your outcome of your clinical trial, right? So biomarkers are helping us to change that game a little bit. And biomarkers can be as simple as something like blood or a retina scan. It can also be something a little bit more invasive, like the cerebral spinal fluid. But then it's also looking at those PET scans, those positron emissions tomography scans. So both a tau and an amyloid PET scan that actually can show those changes in the brain, which is something that isn't being done, can't be seen on a CAT scan or an MRI. So I'm excited about that's going to be tomorrow. We're also going to learn a little bit more about some outcomes from the LEAD study, which is a longitudinal early onset Alzheimer's disease study. And early onset in this clinical term, it refers to people younger than 65. We tend to talk about that as younger onset. And we sort of changed that vocabulary a few years ago because people were getting confused between early stage and early onset. Early stage meaning the earliest part of the disease, early onset meaning prior to the age of 65. But in this particular study, this is looking at people who are 65 or younger. And really looking to see whether or not through this observational study, to see how or what Alzheimer's looks like for people who are younger. Is it the same disease? And what they'll be able to look at is really then comparing some of that work to the Alzheimer's Disease Neuro Initiative, which is a study that's been going on for 10 years to really look to see how the disease progresses in people if it changes because of other factors. For example, people who are over the age of 65 are maybe more likely to have high blood pressure or diabetes, other contributing factors. How does that play into the advancement or change of Alzheimer's disease? And so being able to compare that to people who are living with Alzheimer's disease at a younger age is really important to clinical trial work. And so we're really excited to hear about that. Our own Chief Science Officer, Dr. Maria Carril, is one of the principal investigators helping to lead the way on leads. Here locally, UCSF, Dr. Gil Rabinovich is doing some of that great work as well here in the Bay Area. Then on Wednesday, we're going to start seeing a little bit more of drug development, some of those clinical manifestations. Thursday is really going to be a fun day too. That's going to focus on public health. It's going to focus on dementia care and psychosocial factors, as well as dementia care practice. And Friday, we'll look at a little bit more around some professional development. So it's going to be a packed week. All really, really good stuff. If you're into the big, heavy science stuff, Tuesday and Wednesday are going to be your big days. If you're into some of those non-pharmacologic interventions, Thursday is going to be a big day for you to want to tune in.
Great. Well, I'm really looking forward to the discussion on blood biomarkers. I hope all of you have an opportunity to register for AAIC. Again, you can do that by going to alz.org/AAIC. And thank you so much, Claire, for doing this. It's always a pleasure to see you. Wish we could see you in person. But you're always so helpful, and we really appreciate you doing these Facebook Live sessions with us.